Welcome to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast. Our goal is to keep you informed, inspired, and a little entertained on all things diabetes. The information contained in this program is based on the experience and opinions of the Integrated Diabetes Services clinical team. Given the individualized nature of diabetes care, any changes to your treatment plan should be discussed with your personal healthcare provider. I'm your host, Gary Scheiner, and today we're going to be discussing automated insulin delivery systems. I am delighted to be joined today by Jenny Smith, the super dietitian, certified diabetes care and education specialist with Integrated Diabetes Services. I've had the pleasure of working with Jenny for more than 11 years now. Yeah, even before she had babies. Jenny, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. It's nice to be here, Gary. Thank you. Sure. So I'm obviously Jenny Smith. As Gary said, I'm a dietitian and a certified diabetes care and education specialist. I have had type 1 diabetes since 1988, so a long time, well before any really good technology was on the market. And when I was diagnosed, I had a really awesome care team, which sort of prompted me into this as a career. I really enjoyed what they taught me, the way that they taught it, made me feel like I could really live with diabetes, even though there are all of the day-to-day things to do. I've always been really active, thankful to my father who got both myself and my brother involved in exercise really young.
Me too. My dad was one of those jogging pioneers from the 70s.
Yeah, my dad was a bike rider. That was his thing. I mean, my brother and I both had bicycles as soon as we were little. So yeah, I mean, I biked, and it wasn't until I met my husband that I actually started running. So I haven't run my whole entire life, but I really, really love running now, and enjoy really being able to bring the piece of my personal experience of living with diabetes and now being mom of 2 little boys, that experience as a woman, being able to have a pregnancy with diabetes, having written a book about type 1 pregnancy. Pregnancy with type 1 diabetes with my colleague Ginger. We really established that there was nothing available and nothing really beneficial for women to use. And I'm delighted that I can bring that into the integrated practice. And I've been really focusing even beyond pregnancy a lot more on women's health management. And with the influx of so much more technology in the past 5 years, I think that leads into kind of what we'll discuss today, and a favorite thing of mine to talk about, especially since I've been using kind of a fancier technology system, I guess, for about a little over 6 years now. Pumps are great, but then all of the other stuff that we can get from technology is even better, just in the life of people with diabetes.
What I've always loved about your approach is the practical nature of it. You're speaking from more than just professional experience and wisdom. You're coming at it from, decades of personal experience as well.
Right.
And what you said about the books on pregnancy and type 1, you're right. There are books out there, but they're so vague and general. You're detail oriented, and that's, I think, something that separates you from a lot of the other clinicians that are out there.
Yeah, there are a lot of, as you mentioned, there are some books about diabetes and pregnancy, nothing that's very specific to type 1. And so that's why we really wanted to do that part in particular. But also the detail, as you said, that was a piece that is, I don't think it's missing. I just don't think it was the nature of the way that they wanted those books to be put together. And so they offer more anecdotal stories about diabetes management, which include all manners of managing, whether it's with technology or with multiple daily injections or oral meds or whatever. But yeah, I'm thankful to have been able to work with my friend and colleague Ginger on that.
Sure. Yeah. So the title we gave to today's program, Automated Insulin Delivery, which system is best? Now, automated insulin delivery, there's different names. I mean, people sometimes call them hybrid closed loop systems. There are some people even call them artificial pancreases, and it ticks me off to no end when they use that terminology, because this is this is a far cry from an artificial pancreas, as we all
Right.
know. The user still plays a significant role in managing day to day, even with these systems. So why don't you explain for the listeners what exactly is an automated insulin delivery system?
Absolutely. It's actually a pretty simple explanation. There are three pieces to it. It includes an insulin pump, it includes a continuous glucose monitor, and it includes an algorithm. And the algorithm really is the piece that takes conventional pumping and CGM use up a level, because the algorithm augments insulin delivery based on the rate of change in glucose that's the sensor is delivering to the pump. And the algorithm takes that and either adjusts insulin up or insulin down. And there are many automated insulin delivery systems, some that are on the market or actually what we would say is FDA approved. And then there are other automated insulin delivery systems that have a lot of good research and studies that prove their worth, but they're called do-it-yourself or DIY automated insulin delivery systems. So, and there are different ones all over the world. I mean, we've got some here in the States, and then in Europe, there are some that are not even in use over here. So
we've got some hardware, like a pump that's delivering the insulin. We've got the glucose, it's the continuous glucose sensor. And it sounds like it's you described it as the algorithm. This is the kind of computer program that interprets the data and instructs the pump on when to make adjustments. Do you find, right, is it the algorithm that really makes the system, or is it the hardware components?
In general, if you compare conventional pumping without an algorithm to an AID system, it's the algorithm that generates insulin dosing and suggestions. And in some of the do-it-yourself systems, actually adjusts it even a little bit further within parameters that the person with diabetes can adjust in terms of their targets. All of the systems have safety limits included, which make all of the systems really a very safe option. And in many cases, the majority of the research that's been done actually proves the worth of them in terms of prevention of hypoglycemia or low blood sugar, and even augmenting high blood sugars to a lower elevated level, right? So they really are, it's the algorithm, absolutely, that makes the difference. And in terms of that, could somebody who's using a conventional pump, or even somebody who's using multiple daily injections, could they micromanage to the effect of what an algorithm is doing? To some degree, but it requires an awful lot of day-to-day input of the person. And that means that you're being taken away of just from life, right? The things that you need to do in your own life, whether it's job or business or your kids or your activities, you have to really think a lot more, so to speak. And an algorithm, I kind of feel like an algorithm is sort of like a street sweeper that follows you around, right? It like cleans up little messes in the background. It's not going to clean up big messes, but it's going to make them littler than they were if you were conventionally managing something.
I think of it like a butler that's just following you around your house, just tidying things up. Yeah, same concept.
Yeah. And I think a big piece to it too is that, all of the systems, well, not all, most of them rely on known parameters of your insulin needs, right? So if we have a startup of insulin dosing with an algorithm-driven system that isn't quite right, for most of these systems, again, not all of them, but most of these systems, even the algorithm can't get around poor settings. There are some systems that don't require any settings. And, obviously then how you start it up is based on a couple little factors that you started up with, and then it just goes. And that's the goal of that system. But in general, most of the systems that really have a fine-tuned algorithm and want input from the user, they require some pretty good dialed in settings.
So it sounds like people who use these systems still need to put some work in getting their settings right and understanding self-management of their diabetes in general.
Correct. Yes.
Is there something about automated insulin delivery that just really gets you excited and jazzed up?
Oh, let's see. Lots of things. I love the fact that it's a lot more individualized in terms of what you can do. Parameters can be set, especially in the do-it-yourself systems. The parameters or the targets can be set to meet what your target goals are and or what you've discussed with your clinician or your caregiver. And even the systems that are more FDA approved and have a hard set target, they're targets that are very safe and healthy. And so in terms of that, I think just the personalization of the systems is one of the things I love. The other really great thing that I love is the fact that it works more intuitively. I think my best example is such as like a temporary basal in a manual or a conventional pump. When you set a temporary basal, it goes until you decide to turn it off or until the time period you set it for expires. And the pump delivers it regardless of what your blood sugar is doing. In an automated insulin delivery system with the algorithm enabled, you might have told it to do something. And I'm talking more like the do-it-yourself systems. You may have told the system to aim for a certain target or to adjust by a certain percent. But depending on where your glucose is, where your insulin doses are, your IOB and all of that, its adjustments are actually they're tighter. It's not just going to augment and give because you told it to. And I think that piece is very, very helpful. All of the systems have different targets, like exercise targets. If we're talking even about, the FDA approved systems, they all have an exercise target that allows the system to aim for a higher target, to be a more conservative in the time period leading up to, and maybe even during, maybe even for a couple of hours after exercise where sensitivity really kicks in. And so I think those pieces they're a little bit more fine-tuned because an algorithm, it's a fancy math problem, right? And again, it does relate to settings and how things are originally set. But in general, those are the pieces that I really love about it.
Yeah, you know me, I'm a big sports fan. So I use a lot of
Yes.
sports terms. So these AID systems are very good at calling audibles.
Mm-hmm.
Audible is when the quarterback gets to the line of scrimmage, doesn't like what he sees, changes the play and runs it, hopefully is going to be successful. Yeah, these systems are making decisions every 5 minutes in most cases about the situation. And if what you programmed in isn't working, it'll adjust it. It'll call an audible and switch things up for you. So
Mm-hmm.
I find they do a great job of adjusting even when our recommendations that we put in aren't the best to be using at that moment in time.
Right.
What do you find are some of the shortcomings, and not specific to the systems, but in general? Where do automated delivery systems come up short?
I think that one place that they come up short is it's actually relative to most technology, honestly. It's for those who may have sight issues, hearing issues, dexterity issues. Really, all of the technology that's on the market for diabetes management comes up considerably short in that category. Other places they come up short would really be in more of the approved systems, interoperability, right? We want interoperability. We want the ability for those who can use one particular sensor to be able to choose the system that also works in terms of a pump. Right now, that's not so much the case. Each system has a particular CGM, let's say, that works with it. And we need more ability for people to choose, this sensor works best for me, and I want to use this type of pump. Why do they not work together? We need to figure that out, because there are a lot of people who can't use one sensor for a reason or another, who can't use one type of infusion set or one type of pump product for one reason or another. And for them to be able to pick and choose and put them together and have a system that has an algorithm that works regardless, that's a shortcoming right now.
The good news is things are heading that way. Most systems now, or most of the components, get what's called interoperable designation by the FDA. They have to apply for that. They have to meet more stringent quality standards to qualify for that. But it's heading in that direction. And at some point, we will be able to pick and choose the pump we want, the sensor we want, and the algorithm that we want, and have it all work together as a unit. But it sounds like the same pitfalls that face pump users in general can face people on the AID systems. If the site's not absorbing the insulin well, they're not going to work so well. So we still have to manage those properly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, let's talk now about some of the specific products. What are the options people have who are interested in automated insulin delivery?
Sure. So the approved systems here in the States, at least, are the Medtronic 780. Is their newest. They've had a couple of iterations of it, but the newest is the 780. And then Insulet obviously has Omnipod 5. And then Tandem has the T-Slim X2, right, with Control IQ. And so these are the approved systems. These are the ones that, from an insurance standpoint, you could potentially have coverage for, and pretty good coverage for, depending on what your, insurance carrier is.
What about this new one, the iLet?
I was going to mention that as well. The iLet it's interesting because I think about it very differently than I do the three other automated systems. The iLet being very different in the fact that if you really do need or want improvement in your glucose control, but you don't have all of the pieces to manage, nor maybe you don't have the time, or maybe you have a need for better control, but you just don't want all the fancy parts of the other systems. You want to do as minimal as possible, right? Then the iLet it's an option, because really it's a truly automated system. You don't do much with this at all. You put it on, you put the insulin in the pump, you put an infusion set in, and you settings, weight included, total daily insulin, right? And essentially the pump gets going, and I hate the word learn in automated insulin delivery too, because it's not complete AI at any point in most of these systems at all. But the iLet does adjust. It adapts in an intuitive kind of way. And over some time, after a bit of use, it does accommodate, and it does a pretty great job, honestly. There are a lot of other really great, opportunities to read about it and listen to it in a couple of other podcasts that have information from iLet, founders and developers. But it's a great system if you're looking for something that's truly, for the most part, kind of hands off, outside of, again, insulin and an application of the set.
Yeah. See, you were about to mention also about the DIY, the do-it-yourself systems that people can build.
Yes.
Explain that a little bit.
So the DIY systems are exactly that: DIY, do it yourself. Loop, IAPS, all, there are many of them. Dana Lewis was kind of one of the, I don't even know how many, is it like a decade or so ago already, that she and her husband really kind of fiddled with all of the parts and the pieces and put together a system that was an algorithm driven. Sensor says this, insulin delivery and sort of, profile settings are this, insulin delivery goes forward, right? We've come really far in the do-it-yourself, we are not waiting community, considerably far. And these systems, because they are not approved, they allow the user to have parameters set for targets that are wider than what the approved systems allow. So they, can have a setting as low as 85 for a target range. And the do-it-yourself systems allow you safety limits, essentially, for delivery. There are some fancier ways to automate temporary time periods where you may need more or you may need less insulin in a way that's even more intuitive than some of the exercise or, high limit within the approved systems.
So these DIY systems allow a lot more user involvement and fine tuning on the user's part than the
Yes,
commercially available.
they do.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I've used all of the systems that are out there, as I know you have as well, and I find there's this trade-off between the amount of effort the user puts in and the outcomes that
mhm,
can be achieved. Can you talk
sure.
about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of a comparison of the two, either the approved systems or the do-it-yourself systems, the do-it-yourself are exactly what do-it-yourself means. You build the system yourself. I think the important thing to understand is that the hardware, as you mentioned earlier, the pump and the CGM, they are approved components. They are already a pump piece and a continuous monitor piece that are widely available on the market. So they're not being built in the back of somebody's garage, right?
And by pumps, you're referring to like the Omnipod and some of the older model
Medtronic.
Medtronic pumps.
Correct, exactly. And a couple in Europe, there are other pumps that also have kind of like the open source ability to use these
And the
algorithms
sensor
too.
options, we've got the Dexcom G6, G7,
We've got Libre.
and Libre.
Honestly, I mean, there are sensors that can be used. Again, that's where that interoperable that I mentioned becomes a piece of importance if you're somebody who can only use one sensor for multiple reasons, but it doesn't work with the pump that's your choice. Do it yourself may be the better option for you because there is the ability to cross pair essentially. But do it yourself also means, as you're kind of saying, what the user has to do to maintain. In a do it yourself system, you build the algorithm through a set of very well-defined directions. So it's not like you're picking and hunting for things randomly on the internet. It's very well-defined. The community of support for all of the do-it-yourself systems is enormous online. But it does mean rebuilding your system. Unlike the approved systems, Omnipod 5, Tandem system, Medtronic system, if you have a problem with your pump or components of the system, you call the 800 number and you can get a new pump sent right to you, or the the system helpers on the other end of the line. They're there to answer your questions. Whether they answer it or not, I don't know, but they at least have an 800 line that you can actually call.
You've got
And
a
get
script they can read to you.
They do. Exactly. But whereas, again, the do-it-yourself community has a really large community of supporters, there's not an 800 number to directly call. So I think from a management standpoint or a micromanagement in terms of overall build and maintenance, at times do-it-yourself might be a little bit more. In general use, not so much.
Yeah.
In general use, it does a fantastic job.
We have hundreds of patients using DIY
Yes.
at integrated diabetes, and most of us have used it ourselves. From what I've read, there are somewhere between 15 and 20,000 people using DIY worldwide, and the outcomes seem fantastic. People are able to achieve amazing glucose control with it, and the safety record looks excellent also. So my question then is, why the hell won't the government approve this?
Right. Well, and that is to the case of technically they've approved a type of what was a do-it-yourself system, right? If we talk about just one of them, do-it-yourself loop, we do have Tide Pool Loop, which has been approved by the FDA. It's an algorithm. It does pretty much what the do-it-yourself loopers are using as in terms of the algorithm, with a couple of little adjustments and safety parameters. But unfortunately, at this point, Tide Pool Loop is like a fancy engine to a souped up car that doesn't have a body to drive it. There's no pump to put it in at this point. And that's really, really frustrating for many people. And when you cross over into why is this type of do-it-yourself algorithm not approved, it's approved, but unfortunately, it's an approved system that we still have to do it yourself in order to drive it with. Right? With the body of the pump, we have to use a do-it-yourself. And, as a good example, there are still, I think, a lot of clinicians who really don't believe do-it-yourself systems are necessary. I think they believe truly that there are enough systems approved on the market that are doing in what, the RCT kind of sort of studies have proven. They do a good job. They're reaching targets that are higher than conventional manual pumping systems. Of course they do. Absolutely. They're giving that handhold, that butler behind the scenes, the sweeping, behind. They're helping somebody who didn't know how to do it before. So of course there's proof in the pudding that the approved systems are working. But if you look at the studies that are coming out of the do-it-yourself, that are not cherry-picked data, they're not. There's a wide range of data. There are even studies in Europe now in pregnancy using the CAM APS algorithm-driven system that are amazing outcomes using an algorithm-driven system in pregnancy, which is phenomenal. So, I don't know why. I really don't.
It sounds like
I would have many words for the approvers.
Yeah, with proper guidance and a proper skill set going in, DIY systems can work pretty nicely.
They can.
All right, so everybody wants to know what the best system is. So to help with that, we're going to play a little game I call Cool Stuffs and Pet Peeves. So we're going to go through each system. We got 5 main systems. We got Medtronic, iLet, Tandem, Omnipod, and the do-it-yourself systems. We're going to go through these one at a time. I'm going to name something cool about them because I'm a cool guy. We all know that. And then you're going to give a pet peeve about that item. All right.
Okay.
We'll start with Medtronic. Medtronic's taken a hit in recent years. They've lost market share. A lot of people have switched off of it. One thing I do like about their system is their infusion device. The hardware is important. You have to have insulin absorbing effectively. And the Medtronic 780 offers the opportunity to use their extended wear infusion set, which from my experience does work better than traditional infusion sets. It filters impurities out of the insulin. So what's going into the body is pure and causes fewer reactions. So we do get more consistent, predictable insulin absorption and fewer site problems. So that's one thing I do feel is a definite advantage with the Medtronic 780. You have a pet peeve related to Medtronic system?
I do I can say that I really do like the 780 a lot more. I've only had a couple of people using it. So plugs to them for definitely making an improvement, which is visible. I love that. What I don't love is that the pump itself is cumbersome. It's a bulky. The screen is small, again, from a visual impairment standpoint, from a dexterity standpoint, and this crosses all pumps, but especially their screen is small, and to get through the menus, it's mind-boggling, honestly. And until you really have used it for a fair amount of time, you can get lost scrolling through the menus to try to find what you're trying to do. So I don't, while all the good things about it, I think for old school Medtronic users, it's probably an easy turnover.
Yeah.
They're used to it.
A lot of people have said that they won't use it until it syncs up with a better sensor like a Dexcom. That's
True.
Another issue I hear a lot related to the Medtronic.
And
Granted,
that's
the accuracy has gotten better. Their sensor reliability and accuracy has improved. It's still it's a complex sensor to use. There's a lot of moving parts and pieces and taping and stuff like that. And people just aren't into that anymore. They want simplicity. So
right. They want to pop and go. They want to pop it on, not have anything extra to tape down or be able to get caught on a door frame or to get pulled off in a sport for a young child or whatnot. So yeah, I that would have been my definite second. And I personally haven't used the new sensor, so I have nothing to relate to it. I can say that the couple of people I have using it have noticed an improvement from previous sensors. So that's a plus. Personally, my N of 1 with their previous sensors, they were nowhere near accurate. In fact, they didn't work at all for me. Yeah. So,
all right. Yeah. Let's talk about the iLet next from Beta Bionics. Give us a pro. What's one of the cool things you think that the iLet offers?
I think the pro is its simplicity. I think the pro is truly that there's no counting. There's no entering.
You're talking about carb counting.
I'm talking about carb counting. There's no carb counting. There's no adjustment component to it. There's not even anything to look at in terms of what it's doing. So your data is truly coming from what you can see on your CGM and alerts and alarms for that, right? So it's simplicity. And I think what goes further into that is the grand majority of people who have diabetes, both type 2 and type 1, may not have somebody who can help them as much with intensive management. At Integrated Diabetes, we work with a lot of people who want the more. They want the intensive. They want to know how to do it and why to do it and where to adjust and how to adjust. They want the very precise adjustments. But a good majority of people aren't going to get that. And when we're talking about type 2 diabetes, especially, and insulin users for type 2 diabetes, a system like this, where there aren't bells and whistles, truly, it can from the studies, it can absolutely improve their glucose management. Is it going to get them to a 5.5 A1C? It is not. But A1C reduction from sitting at a 9 or a 10 down to a 7, that's huge. That's huge for somebody's health. And so I think that's where I see the positive is.
I appreciate the simplicity of their system. Believe me, I'm not having to micromanage, but it also doesn't give you the ability to micromanage. So people who are exercising or having specific meal types, there's nothing you can do to manage your glucose properly in a lot of those situations.
Right.
That's my pet peeve is you don't have any tools at your disposal to manage. So yeah, somebody with a double-digit A1C will see improvement. But I would be challenged to get the A1C down to around 7 with this. Most patients I've had using this have found their glucose is stuck in the high hundreds, low 200s a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. So, like we were discussing before, there's this trade-off between outcomes and effort. This is an extremely low effort system. You're going to sacrifice your glucose outcomes as a result. So,
if you are a micromanager to begin with, yes, this is not your system. If that's your goal, it's not. I agree, though, in its simplicity of management. Let's say somebody is improving because they've got something that is like that butler, right? It's behind the scenes. It's doing a lot because it can with the algorithm. Mm-hmm. But let's say they want to start exercising now. They're feeling so much better with this improved glucose overall and things that they're learning that they want to start exercising. Well, taking some piece and making it simpler now adds into their case, making it harder. Now they have to think around what the system may or may not have been doing because we're kind of blinded to the data, right? And so they have to be able to strategically figure out, well, for this exercise session, I have to make sure my glucose is here and I have to make sure that I eat something, because if I don't, the system is going to send me low. It doesn't know that I'm exercising.
The good news is that the folks at Beta Bionics are moving full steam ahead with their dual hormone glucagon insulin system.
Awesome.
Which will allow the algorithm to be much more aggressive and achieve the kind of tight control the other systems can get with the simplicity combined.
Cool.
Let's talk about the Tandem X2 with Control IQ. What do you particularly like about that system?
My favorite thing about the system is that it, as I mentioned very early on, settings matter. And for those who really want a pump that is that assistive component behind settings that they know are trusted, but they don't want as much micromanagement on their own, Tandem is the pump. Tandem allows you to use a set basal profile with insulin to carb ratios, with correction factors. Yes, there's a hard set target.
With a set basal profile, you mean a basal program that varies by time of day, not flat like most of the other
Correct.
systems.
It's like taking your manual profile, testing it, turning on Control IQ. Now you've got automation on top of settings that you know are trusted. And that can make an enormous difference. I would say that people that I have the pleasure to work with who are using Control IQ, once we get settings correct, they like their system so much more.
Yeah, it's like a street sweeper that's working on just a little bit dirty street. It's not New Orleans after Mardi Gras.
Correct. Absolutely. That's my favorite thing. The other thing that Tandem really did fantastic from the get-go is the ability to enable a different profile to use based on need. So if your needs go up as a female with diabetes at certain points in the month, you can have a profile that is higher in terms of that base basal. Mm-hmm. Control IQ then will work with that once you enable that profile. A sick day, you could have a sick day profile that's like a stomach bug where your needs are dialed down. You can enable it and have the safety of Control IQ still being there for you because you've got settings that you now have dialed back. Yeah. That is, I love that piece of, if I could give them a like a high five for doing something fantastic, that would be it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a simple algorithm also. Mm-hmm. It doesn't require, days of data collection to figure things out. It's a very simplified algorithm.
Yep.
When you talk about settings, that's where I have a couple of issues with Tandem. There are a couple of important settings that the user can't adjust. One of them being the target glucose. It's fixed at 110. The other is the duration of insulin action, which is fixed at 5 hours, which doesn't work for everybody.
True.
And some people struggle a bit because of that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, otherwise, I find it's a pretty effective system overall.
Yeah.
All right, let's turn to the Omnipod. The one thing I really like that I think is cool about the Omnipod 5 system is the pods themselves, the tubeless approach. Mm-hmm. I find it's just convenient. It's easy to do site changes and pod changes. You can stick the pod just about any place on your body since you don't have to manually insert an infusion set. For sports, you don't have to worry about disconnecting and reconnecting and all that. So I love the pods. I just find as a pump delivery system, the pods are terrific. And the fact that it integrates with the Dexcom is wonderful. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there's a lot of things, I guess, about the algorithm itself and about some of the limitations I'll let you expand upon. So what are some of your pet peeves, Jenny, about Omnipod?
Sure. I'm gonna actually add one to your liked pieces. You say the pod. I like the pod too. Obviously, being tubeless is fantastic. But I really do like the fact that the algorithm resides in the pods, right? So that the controller, that's a piece of navigating boluses and that kind of stuff. It does not have to be on the person for the algorithm to continue to make insulin adjustments. So if somebody is on a run and they drop their controller on the path and don't realize it, their algorithm continues to work because it's communicating directly with the sensor on the body. So I like that piece. That I think that was a smart move. I have many pet peeves.
Let's hear.
Along with that algorithm residing in the pod, I don't know how many number one pet peeves I have, but this is definitely one of them. The fact that there is no place that the data that has been adapted up to today will continue to work if I have to change a controller or if I want to now use the app on my phone as my controller instead of the handheld controller from the system.
Or if you have to replace your phone and
correct
install the app, you start fresh.
100% wrong. That should not be the case. I don't know who decided that was right, but I don't think that was right. So there's a pet peeve. I'm trying to control my feedback.
Are there features that are lacking in the Omnipod 5 that are in other systems that you would miss?
There are in Omnipod 5, the features that I don't love are the fact that there is no, outside of looking at your insulin delivery on the actual controller, there's nowhere to see what each pulse of insulin is at all. And I mean, this is a big piece that's obviously discussed all over the place in the online communities, but there's nowhere to see the data outside of that controller. There's no follow app. There's nothing for a caregiver to be able to see until they log into Gluco, and Gluco has the data, obviously, but that's not easy to do. And it's cumbersome, and it adds a layer, and it doesn't help school systems. It doesn't help the person who's in a business meeting to be able to see, well, what's the system done for me? I can see that it's left my adapted basal on, but has it been giving me more? Has it been just giving me what it thinks that I need? Where am I sitting in terms of my insulin? IOB is there, yes, but I think even the IOB is a hit for me, because even in manual mode, the system considers IOB if your glucose sits below the target that you have set. Mm-hmm. If it sits below that, it will show IOB in a basal only time period. And I know because when I tested out the Omnipod 5 myself, I used manual mode for a few days. And the first day that I used it, I woke up in the morning and I had like a negative IOB. And it was subtracting insulin from my dose. And I couldn't understand why until I went to the manual, which is very detailed. And you have to search for the fine line that tells you that if your glucose is below the target, it will assume that your basal delivery in manual mode has contributed to that, and it will be deducted from the bolus calculation.
When it's really just offsetting your liver's glucose output.
Correct.
It's a wash.
I
remember when I tried the Omnipod 5, there were two things I really missed. One was the ability to extend boluses. Mm-hmm. So like it or not, even if the algorithm adjusts your basal after a meal, if you give a full dose for a slow digesting meal, you're going to drop and you could wind up low very easily.
Correct.
And the other thing is, you can't set temp basals, you can't switch basal profiles, none of that. It just has the one override. It's a temporary override for exercise that makes the algorithm slightly less aggressive. And even that doesn't work in those cases. So
no, and it doesn't. I think you bring in a good piece that I think is absent. Actually, it's a negative in all of these systems that are approved systems, which isn't so much the case in the do-it-yourself systems.
Yeah,
is the fact. Oh, go ahead.
Let's talk about that, because the DIY, you mentioned some really nice things about it. Are there things about the DIY systems that you don't like? Like personally, I don't like the fact that you have to be competent with a Mac system. You need a Mac computer to build the app, to maintain it, to update it, and so on. I've always been a PC guy, so where does that leave me?
Yeah, in terms of that, there is new turnaround. Obviously, there is what's now available called a browser build. So technically, you don't actually have to have a Mac computer if you go through the browser build, and that's a nice option. Again, because a Mac computer, if this is what you're considering, and that's why the only reason you're actually buying a Mac computer, that's an expensive input just to be able to maintain a pumping system, right? Thankfully too, there are, in terms of do it yourself, while it is highly recommended that you build yourself, there are systems that are in place, services available that will build and maintain it for you. I think the build itself, the yearly rebuild, is another one of those that I've just I've been using do-it-yourself loop for 6 years already. So it is what it is at this point. I just do it.
T1 Pal helps a lot of our patients to create the system for themselves.
Yeah. So I think, the other thing is that for some of the components, you may be using outdated or unwarranted products, right? I've got a couple of people here that I work with in the States that they cannot use pods. They just can't. Whether it's an irritation or it's a fill component, there's just not enough available space to put the amount of insulin they need in the pump. And so they're using really old Medtronic pumps in order to be able to use their loop system specifically. And I think it's a downfall, definitely. And it's a reason that we need to get on board here and approve these systems.
Yeah, I saved pumps for so many years. So luckily we built up a stock of these older Medtronic pumps that are still loop compatible. So we've been able to help people get these. But yeah, you're right. They're old. They could crumble and die at any time, and then you're kind of SOL at that point.
Right.
Yeah, and the other thing with loop, and this is a kind of a double-edged sword, but the fact that everything is controlled through your phone is great. A lot of people have their phone on them all the time, but it also means you got to have your phone on you all the time. Now, you've got to have it nearby to program things and for the algorithm to make the adjustments that are necessary.
Correct.
So,
yeah.
Clearly with Loop, there's more effort involved in building and maintaining it. There's a lot more customization features that the user can and should use. So there is more effort, but the outcomes speak for themselves. I mean, I'd say hands down, people are able to achieve tighter control using the DIY Loop system than any of the commercially available products.
Right. And I think a big piece to that, as I was going to mention before, the current approved systems lack a piece that in the do-it-yourself systems has been there from the beginning. And that's the consideration of food. You brought in the idea that, and that's another piece I don't love about Omnipod 5, is there is no extended bolus feature at all. Once you're automated, that's not there. Tandem, thankfully, another wonderful thing that they did was they kept extended bolus as an option in the picture in automated mode. You can still use an extended bolus. That's fantastic. Neither Medtronic nor Omnipod 5 will do that.
Right.
But our Loop systems, our do-it-yourself, all of the systems, when you enter food or carbohydrates, you also have to acknowledge an absorption time, a time period over which the hours after this, in terms of what the system is predicting to happen to your glucose, is relative not to the trend in your glucose alone, but to the IOB and to how long you said this food was going to have an impact. Something like pizza or nacho night or whatever, or just you're going to sit down to the whole block of cheese because that's what you're hungry for. You need to be able to tell the system, pay attention. This is
I've always felt that was the secret sauce to this.
It is
the DIY is it's balancing active insulin against active carbs. None of the other systems do that.
Right.
That's what allows it to achieve those kind of outcomes.
Absolutely.
So we're almost out of time. Are there any take-home messages you have for our listeners about AID systems?
My take-home, I think, is the same as what I usually discuss when I work with somebody individually. It is, what are the things that are really important about managing your diabetes? What is your lifestyle? Would it be better for you to try a tubeless pump versus one that has tubing based on work, lifestyle, kids, whatever might be in the picture? So picking based on some features, but also picking based on the type of person that you are. Each of these systems, I think it has for lack of a better way to say it, it's got like a personality that goes with the system.
What I was thinking too. Yeah.
It does. And you have to know what kind of assistance, what kind of butler to have with you, right? You might not want the one that's so kind and gentle and whatever, because you're like, no, I need more. Please help me more than you're helping me. And you're not going to be happy with the system then, right? So when I work with somebody and we do, in terms of everybody we work with at Integrated, we work individually to make sure that we're really catering to the need. And if somebody's saying, hey, I'm thinking about switching, why are you thinking about switching? What is your system not doing? What do you think this new system is going to do for you differently? And then we have to clear up some of the misconceptions, or say, yeah, I can see where this could be better for you, right?
The big decision, you're going to be married to that system for 4 or 5 years. That's longer than the average marriage lasts. So you got to pick wisely. Yeah. It's worth considering and talking with experts who can, guide you and give you some insight that you might not get on your own.
Right.
I mean, you put it perfectly. I was thinking the same thing. It's the personality of the user and the system that you have to consider. So, the answer is which is the best AID system? The answer is yes. I mean, it's the one that matches your needs and personality the best.
Right. Absolutely. So.
All right. Well, listen, Jenny, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed the discussion. As a reminder, Integrated Diabetes Services is available worldwide to assist people of all ages with their glucose management, self-management education, and making the optimal choices when it comes to tools and technologies. We also offer specialized services in both English and Spanish in sports and exercise, weight loss, type 1 pregnancies, and emotional support. For more information, visit integrateddiabetes.com or email info@integrateddiabetes.com. So on behalf of everyone at Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, I'm Gary Scheiner, and have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Gary.